someone or yourself lost someone during that level? Okay, how many of you were in New York or New Jersey when this happened and actually saw this film? It was a scary.
Becky.
A day that affected all of us.
Oh.
I'd say that is my personal opinion, and I think that extends to most of you. And one of the things that upset me a lot was after this happened and as we got older, I started hearing a lot of people not believe that scientists and investigators and officers, they didn't bother to go through the remains. And being that I'm going into forensics, I decided to argue that. And I'm going to try to persuade you that they did all that they could to go through all the debris and all the remains and try to get as many things identified as possible. Common belief, many people think that investigators and scientists didn't take the time to go through all the debris from this devastating day. At Ground Zero, there were many challenges. There was a lot of types of debris, and there was a very long and confusing identification process. The challenge. The estimated remains was 20,000. The actual number was about 2,700. The estimated samples to be analyzed were 35,000. Actual was around 20,000. And when they say samples, a lot of it was, DNA and human type remains. I'm trying not to be too graphic. There was also other remains that were often mistaken. Family collections. A lot of people that were involved were firefighters, police officers, anyone who was there to help clean up. They had some emotional tie to this. So if they found something, they'd bring it. But at the same time, they're amateurs. So, they see what they think is a bone fragment. It could be a piece of wood. So that was a lot of what the challenge was. Because there were recording errors, there were multiple collections, and they were inaccurate. And because these people were amateurs, firefighters, police officers, they had no prior training. And a lot of people had personal family connections, or it was someone they worked with, which made it that much more difficult because there's an emotional tie. And then a lot of stuff that they found was just handwritten. They had tents set up to go through this identification process. They didn't have a lot of computers. So then you had to decipher someone's handwriting. And we all know some people have probably the worst handwriting you've ever seen. The types of debris. As you can see on this chart below, there was lots and lots of bone, some tissue, and some other debris. There wasn't a lot of teeth, hair, or bloodstains, or there was very few non-DNA remains. Now, do you guys know what cremation is? Basically, that's what happens when the planes hit the towers. The heat from the jet fuel and everything, it just bursts into flames, just combustion. And when stuff like that happens, there's not a lot of DNA left in anything. So even if they did find a bone fragment or a tooth or something, the chance of it still having DNA to process was slim to none. So that's a lot of the reasons why they didn't identify a lot of things. And if you look at this picture here, I know it's a little blurry. Every piece of remain went into a boat like that. Everything. If it was this big, if it was this big, anything and everything that could be human went into that little boat, and that's where they tested it. And here are some pictures of remains that they found. I'm not positive what those are. I think the bottom one's a piece of a rib. I know it's a little crap. And also, I know it's hard to read down here, but it goes from September 2001 to September 2002, and it shows you the amount of bones and when it peaked up and they were found. This is March, I believe, which was another big peak, and obviously October was the biggest peak. There have been more bones found up till September 2005. I mean, obviously now, because they have the memorial there, obviously haven't found anything, but before the memorial they were still finding things. This is the identification process. As you can see, it's quite confusing. I couldn't even follow it that well. But it just shows how many different places it has to go, and then the trail of evidence also gets lost within the process because it does have to go to so many places. I mean, if they do identify it, they have to tell police who they think it is, and they have to find if the person was actually there, so on and so forth. If it's something they can't identify, they send it to a lab, to send it somewhere else, to send it back, to send it to the police, to send it back. It was very confusing. these were all the errors where they were found. Because there were so many places it could go and it had to go. There was places where it would get, sent to the wrong place or misidentified. So as you can see, there was a lot of them. These are the statistics. Total victims, almost 3,000. Total identified, after around 2002 was a little over 1,000. Since it's about 1,600, which is a decent amount compared to the victims. As you can see, compared to that number, there weren't many whole bodies recovered. And total remains recovered, 19, almost 20,000. And total debris removed, 1,610,852 tons. So that's a lot. And a lot of people don't think about that when they say, oh yeah, they didn't bother to find, my father and my uncle. Yeah, they didn't bother. But when there's that much, and there's only that many, it's hard to find. And like I said, with all the heat that was created from the planes crashing in and from the heat of the jet fuel and everything else, there's not much left. As I said, identification was extremely difficult. There were many types of remains and debris. Most were burned beyond recognition and no longer contained DNA. Many individuals were involved, like I said, family, police officers, firefighters, and they weren't experienced, so if they did find something, maybe it wasn't even part of the person. And as you guys saw in that lovely flow chart, it's a very long identification process. And most of my information came from a symposium I went to a couple years ago, and actually was a fellow from Penn State. He recently retired, but he was the chief scientist on scene. He was the one who set up most of the tents across the river onto the Jersey side, and he was the one who had, his people, many of which were from Penn State, identifying all of this. So I actually met the person who conducted a lot of this, which was very interesting. Any questions? You do?